Give us a bit of history, Ben, of how you started, where you've come from.
Where I started out 32 years ago.
Right.
I was a kid. I lived in Peckham, and my parents owned a pub, and my uncle Charlie Rumble, he had a pub, and bits of ag, like lots of young kids from the streets of London started getting involved with ag. I had too much to say for myself, and didn't wasn't a great lover of football, even though I had to got took to the boxing gym after I had a little bit of a fallout with a lad at school, and I was hooked. Went on from there. I didn't take it too seriously at first. First 3 or 4 years. Stayed at a club called Peckham, and then a friend of mine left and went to a lot bigger club, oldest club in the country, the Lynn. And a guy got hold of me one day, an old guy, and he said to me, Benny, no, he pulled my dad. My dad really came to the gym. He was busy running the pub, and he came down and said, look, I want to talk to your dad. I thought, oh, what's the matter? What have I done now? I pulled my dad and said, look, I want your boy to either leave the gym or take it seriously. And he said, what do you mean leave the gym? He said, well, he's a very, very good fighter, very, very dedicated, but he lives a life in the gym, but out of the gym he's up no good, and he eats crap and this and that. So I had a long chat with my dad, and I said, look, I want to take this seriously, I want to do it. And we went on from there.
Okay. How many amateur fights, Ben, did you have?
113 amateurs.
That's a lot of fights. And record?
I never ever been knocked out. A couple of freestanding 8 counts. I boxed all around the world, and I think I won about 96, 97 fights.
You won 96.
I went to 6 national finals, won 5 national titles, boxed in the World Junior Games, the European Junior Games.
The name Cockney Kid, Ben, how did you get that name?
Well, what happened? I am from Peckham, and I am a Millwall boy, but my dad, my mum's family, my dad's actually from Bethnal Green. And my family, the Mays, and my dad come from east to south, met my mum, and I was so really, there used to be, as we all know, hands across the water. There was a bit of a divide. Go back certain.
There's a bit of history on that. That's East London and South London.
East London and South. I mean, there was a famous saying. They say hands across the water. If you was friends, and a few people that cut a few corners, helped each other out, and I was a little bit of not a rarity, but I come from. So what I had both sides. I was East and I was South. I lived in South, but I was always in East, and I used to box at York Hall, obviously a lot as a good amateur. As an amateur, I was always there. And the famous saying in South London was, if you box at York Hall, you've got to meet a kid from East London, you've got to knock them out to win.
Right.
But I never had that ag.
No.
Because people used to think, oh, I've got to fight Benny May's got to come from South. Well, I had more people than because I had everyone from East and everyone from South. And I used to have a great time there. I loved York Hall.
And the thing about Benny, he always brings a crowd, and I love the music, your walkout music, London's Calling.
I've always
atmosphere.
I've always had a big following since a kid. I mean, obviously I beat people quite quickly, but I've never really fought anybody who was a walkover on paper. And I think the following, that's justice to the following, because predominantly my boxing fans are boxing people.
Yeah,
and they say, you knock a bum, I'm not being rude, you knock a bum over there, half a mate coming to see you again.
No. Tell me something about from the amateur you went pro.
Yeah.
How many pro fights?
I had 3 pro fights.
Yeah.
Once again I was getting ahead of myself, and if I'm honest with myself and honest with you guys, I was 19, thought I knew it all, cocksure, thought the boxing game in the world, I just have to turn up, and I was falling by the wayside a little bit.
Now, when you say falling down the wayside, and feel free to, we don't want to go into details, but along the way, you've had a few interruptions, shall I say, in your career.
Well, when I was at that particular time, when I was 19, my dad had died a few years previously, who sort of was a bit of, not to say me and my dad never loved each other, because we did unconditionally, but my dad was a very disciplinarian. I never listened to many people, but I listened to my dad. He didn't have to say very much to keep me in line. And once I lost my dad, I still trained. In fact, I won everything, but out of the gym, I mixed in certain circles, and all the while I was active boxing, and I'd take to aim at, there was never any problem. And I sort of kept my friends separate, who was who people that cut a few corners and got up to no good occasionally, and got to 19 years old and I turned pro, with I went and met everybody. Frank Maloney, Frank Warren. At that time, he was still going Mickey Duff. But I wound up going with a guy who was also from Peckham, Frank Maloney, i.e. now Kelly Maloney.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
And at the time he managed Lennox Lewis.
Yeah.
And Lennox Lewis was the man, the baddest man on the planet. He was the heavyweight champion of the world. And opportunity arose, and I went and met Frank, and we all knew sort of family friends, all from the same manor, and he knew my uncles went to school with them. So there's a little tale to be told quickly. I'll do it briefly. I went to a boxing show, met a guy called Eric Guy, and I knew he was Frank Maloney's right-hand man. And my relation Charlie Rumble said, go on, tell him. So what I'd done, he'd heard I was turning pro, and really I spun him a yarn. I said, all right, how you doing, Eric? Where you been, Ben? So I've been with Frank Warren today, he took me out today, he's sending me to the States, he's doing this to me, doing that to me. Well, I left, that was at Milton Keynes. By the time I got to my mum's house, she said, press the answer machine, I sat on the stairs. This is Frank Maloney, do not sign nothing. So
you spoke to him?
So he took me up his office, offered me the world, sent me to America. I lived in the States for a couple of years.
Really?
At the time I didn't know what I had, but probably the best learning curve in my life, as well as in my boxing career, because it's held me into good stead till to this day.
Good. So, after your pro career, what happened there?
I'll tell you what happened now. I won my first, come back from the States, had my first pro fight. Won that, no problem. And I got cut. I'd always got damage around me. I was eager beaver, rushing. And when you've got to have a couple of months out of the gym then, 8 weeks out of the gym, you've been living in the States for over a year, training flat out. And now, most kids, most fighters who are dying a lot would think, blind at us, like, I've had it off, I'm on holiday. But I never really wanted to be away from it, because in a sick kind of way, I realised if once I'm away from it, I'm mixing the wrong circles and you get sucked in. And not that I blamed anybody for anything, I was had my own mind, my own mouth. But the long and short of that was that I stayed out of the gym, never went back with my eye healed up, mixed in certain circles, and I wound up, as me and you would subtly call, a 2-star holiday.
2-star holiday.
Wound up.
Was that all inclusive, Ben?
It was all inclusive, that's right.
Right.
And anyhow, I've done that. Kept myself in shape, a little bit disillusioned with my life, and in fact I fell out of love with boxing. And then I came out, and a mutual friend of ours, my good friend Charlie Rumble, he introduced me to yourself.
That's right, through Charlie Rumble.
I think I'd done the corner one night.
Yeah, you did, at the Circus Tavern.
And
yes.
And I can remember somebody talking to you about me standing next to me.
Bang on, man. That was right.
Yeah.
And they went to me, said, this guy, big career, big amateur, but sells a powerful 300 or 400 tickets.
Yeah.
Then the years did pick up a little bit with me,
yeah.
But we've never looked back, because apart from being very, very close friends, good friends in fact, Benny went on to have at least 20 fights for me.
20 fights, yeah.
Unbeaten.
British. Two or three ones that stand out. I had one fight with you, and a nice kid. My first fight, I think you wanted to see whether the what it said was on the tin, and I thought, God, I've got to remember his name now. Shane Mead. Brave as a lion.
Shane. A body shot.
But I will be very honest. I'll be very polite. Shane Mead was a very brave guy, but technically not very good. And I think it went on for about less than a minute. And then after that, he said, "What do you want next?" And I said, "What have you got?"
Yeah.
And then you rang me and said, "Do you want a British title fight?"
That's right.
And I said, yeah. And then we had a big build-up, Terry the Tan,
right.
Who was, I mean, he's still acting out, at the time was the man on the block.
Yeah, definitely.
And I remember coming to the weigh-in with you, and I turned up with a few of the boys, and I was 10 stone 7, and he was 10 stone 7, and I thought, I've been round the world and back in this game. He's the biggest 10 stone 7 I've ever seen. And I made sure I watched him get on scales.
Yeah, I remember.
And that was a good fight.
That was a blinding fight. I think you stopped him with that body shot in the third.
Third round, yeah.
Yeah.
It went hammer and tongs until the death, yeah. Then he just.
And I don't think he'd ever been stopped. And like Benny said, he's still active now. He's probably had in excess of 250 fights. Yeah. But I'll tell you a fight that sticks out in my mind was a man called Vanny Purdy. Travelling boy, I believe he might have been a travelling boy, or he had background, but very tough, very strong boy, and that was for
the world title,
the 12-round IBO world title.
You rang me, And I was, again, like sometimes in my life with the boxing, again, a little bit disillusioned. Never really had much contact with you for 3 to 4 months. Always need a challenge. I could never fight any because I couldn't get up for it. And then you said, well, how do you fancy a 12-round fight?
That's right.
Tim Witherspoon against Vanny Purdy. Tim Witherspoon now.
Yeah. Top
fight for a world title. And I pulled your arm off, I think.
Exactly. And it was nice because we were bringing Tim Witherspoon over from the States. It all fell into place.
Yeah.
Tim was at the big fight at Benny. And again, if my memory serves me well, it went to 9 rounds. A war over 9 rounds.
I'll tell you the story behind that fight. 2 or 3 weeks before, I won't say with who, but Terry, I rang Terry, said, I've had a rout. And I eat my hand. And I broke my hand down, and now it's an old injury. If any boxer will tell you that. And we went to the gym with the guy who was training me at the time, and I've been training me for Stevie Barrett for years. And Ryan Barrett, the son, who's been the world champion himself, he looked at me and straight away when he broke that. He said 6-8 weeks. Fight was in 4 weeks' time.
Yeah.
I said, I've been training for 10 weeks, I've got a fight. So Steve Barrett said, listen, we'll do 1 or 2 wins. Terry said, look, this is what I'm doing. Stephen, I'll train you still, but Terry's got to get your hand sorted. Terry sent me to a private doctor, the best man that you could get, who all fighters went to, rugby players, fighters, cortisone injection there, and then turned up on the night. But prior to that, the month leading up, was all I'd done was trained, was my left hand.
Yeah,
Pop, feint with the jab, left hook, all the jab, left hook underneath. And on the night, I remember the cortisone injecting down in, and I was in great shape, but I thought, there was a little bit of doubt. I thought, these kids are strong as because he don't stop coming. His brother's fought for a world title. He's a good kid. And, punches.
Big punches.
And I had Billy Beck in my corner, and I thought, I've just got to stay out. And he knew about my hand. Steve Barrett too was there. And for 5 or 6 rounds, if you watch the fight over, I've watched it over and over and over again. I flew out the traps, and it was all left hand. And he never tumbled it really until the 5th round. And I think corner may have tumbled it. There weren't much going on with the right hand.
Right.
And then we said in the corner, what are you going to do? I said, well, he said, and Billy went, listen, you've got to let him have it now. You've got to let the right hand go. Or he said, because he tumbled, it's a matter of time before he creeps back into the fight.
Yeah.
So me having my little bit of boxing brain, where I've had longevity in the game, I thought, yeah, I'm going to use the right hand, but I'm also going to mix it up and throw a few feints and up the pace, drop the pace. And round 8, last punch of round 8, I slipped out the right hand for a screw shot, and he was out on his feet. Another 10 seconds, it was game over. And then the 9th round came, and Billy Beck actually said to me, look, get him out of here now. He's gone, get him out of here. And I thought, it's all right for you to say that. I've got a broken hand here, I'm breathing out my rear end.
Yeah.
And I've got thousands of people screaming my name. Anyhow, fight finished in the 9th. Good fight. And probably, still to this day, probably my best performance ever.
Well, I would say that one of the best. There's a couple of fights that stick out. I've promoted thousands of fights, and they're all good boys. But fights that stick out in my mind was Paul Kavanagh back in the day when we first started. But the fight that stays with me now is the Benny May versus Vanny Purdy fight. It was a war of attrition all the way through till he slung them punches in at the end. And I see a very, very strong man have to stop. And what I like to do now is, I don't know if I'm ever going to get Benny back on the firm, because Benny never says never. Is that the same,
Ben?
That's
right. No, yeah.
And we'll be seeing each other soon. I hope you'll be coming back on the firm.
Never say never.